Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Terra Nova. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama takes place in the not-too-distant 22nd century when Earth's environment deteriorated rapidly due to overdevelopment by humanity and an ever-growing population. The planet's ecological conditions worsened steadily, and the world was gradually heading toward extinction. In an effort to find a new home, humanity began searching for ways to reverse the situation, but Earth's environment had already become irreversible. Fortunately, the scientists of this era had already developed the technology to travel through space and time. They pinned all their hopes on this technology. They chose a prehistoric era as the destination for the new home, initiating a migration project called Terra Nova. However, with such a large population, even immigration proved to be very difficult. To address the overpopulation issue, the government implemented a two-child policy. However, exceeding this limit didn't just come with fines, it carried the threat of imprisonment. The man in front of us is named Jim, an excellent sheriff. His wife, Elizabeth, is a skilled surgeon, and their life together is very happy. However, no one would have guessed that the couple violated the two-child policy and secretly had 3 children. Their youngest daughter, Zoe, is their family's secret. Life is a bit tough, but the family is still content. Yet secrets have a way of being uncovered, and it was only a matter of time before this one was discovered. One day, their eldest daughter came home from school looking flustered. Immediately, the couple realized something was wrong. It was the government investigators. But little Zoe was still at home. In a panic, they hid Zoe in the ventilation duct. Unfortunately, they underestimated the investigators. It didn't take long before Zoe was found. As Zoe was about to be taken away, Jim couldn't bear it. He clashed with the investigators, but his chicken strength was no match for their muscles, and he was subdued. Since he had openly attacked the investigators, Jim was sentenced to 6 years in prison. 2 years later, Elizabeth suddenly came to visit Jim in prison. It turned out that, as a surgeon, she had been selected as part of the 10th batch of immigrants. This news thrilled Jim, because all selected immigrants could bring their families along. However, Elizabeth's next words were like a cold shower. Due to the incident 2 years ago, Jim had been excluded, and since Zoe was born in violation of the policy, she was not eligible either. But this wouldn't break up their family. To ensure the whole family could join Terra Nova, Jim managed to escape from prison on the day of the migration using tools. Despite the excruciating pain, he surgically removed the tracking device from his body and arrived at the transport portal just in time, with Zoe hidden in his backpack. But fate had other plans, as Zoe's hiding was bound to be discovered. Just as the family was about to travel through the time portal, a guard inspecting them noticed Jim's unusual behavior. To ensure his family's safe passage, he stayed behind for questioning. After watching his family successfully pass through the portal, Jim suddenly attacked the guard, knocking him out and rushing into the portal himself. However, upon entering the prehistoric world, more unexpected troubles followed. This was the era with the highest oxygen levels on Earth. Jim immediately experienced oxygen intoxication and collapsed, his weapon still in hand. The guards saw him as a suspicious figure and aimed their weapons at him, demanding to check his backpack, where Zoe was hidden. Just as they were about to open the bag, Jim and his family tried to stop them, but eventually the bag was opened. Upon seeing the little girl inside, the guards quickly pieced things together. Yet surprisingly, they did not punish Jim and his family, choosing to let them go. After a long journey with the main group, they finally arrived at their new home. It was led by Commander Taylor, and most of the people were part of the 10th batch of immigrants. After a brief welcome from Taylor, Jim and Elizabeth were brought before him. As a rare medical professional, Elizabeth was highly valued, but Taylor looked down on Jim, seeing him as a criminal with no value to the new home. However, since they were already here, rather than sending him back, they decided to put him to work for the community. Seeing Jim's chicken physique, Taylor thought he would be perfect for farm labor, so he assigned him the most strenuous tasks. After leaving Taylor's office, Jim and Elizabeth took their children to their new home. The equipment here was much better than on Earth, and Zoe was very curious about the new environment. While exploring, they encountered a giant brachiosaurus eating, its massive size and long neck leaving everyone in awe. It was at this moment that they truly realized they had arrived in a prehistoric world. The next day, Jim arrived at the production team and received his first task, clearing the weeds in the new home. However, these weeds had grown as thick as tree trunks, and even a strong man like Jim found this task extremely difficult. Moreover, the prehistoric era was full of dangers. While clearing the area, a centipede as large as his hormone-let-go arm appeared in front of Jim, startling him and causing him to fall off the fence. Fortunately, this little incident didn't affect his work, and both Jim and his wife were gradually adapting to their new life here. Compared to the couple, who were adjusting to their new life by following the rules, their son Josh quickly became acquainted with a particularly beautiful girl named Sky. Sky was an orphan, closely connected to Commander Taylor, who treated her like his own daughter. As a result, Sky was very familiar with the camp and immediately took Josh on a tour. Through Sky, Josh met a few new friends, all young people yearning for freedom. To welcome Josh, they secretly snuck out of the camp to witness the new sights of the prehistoric world. They ended up in a restricted area and saw a series of mysterious symbols which were hiding a huge secret. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had an unexpected encounter. She had just finished dressing the wounds of an injured man when the soldiers informed her that the man was attacked for stealing electricity. Elizabeth was confused, but before the soldiers could explain further, the man suddenly got up, took Elizabeth hostage, and threatened the guards to hand over their weapons. In a hurry, he escaped the hospital. Using the camp's terrain to his advantage, he made his way toward Commander Taylor. Jim happened to see this and quietly followed him. Upon seeing Taylor, the man pulled out a weapon, clearly intending to kill him. In a critical moment, Jim risked his own safety and knocked the man down, saving Taylor. The sudden appearance of an attacker in the new home made Jim realize that things weren't as peaceful as they seemed. He questioned Taylor about what had happened. To answer Jim, Taylor took him to a nearby mountain and explained that the man was from the 6th batch of immigrants, rebels who had split from the new home. These individuals were concerned about the camp's security system and occasionally came to steal. Initially, Taylor hadn't been worried, but over time he realized that these rebels seemed determined to destroy the new home. So he assembled an elite team and needed trustworthy partners. Jim's actions had earned his trust, and with Taylor's invitation, Jim joined the security team. Just then, they discovered 2 transport vehicles speeding toward the camp, carrying the rebels. Clearly, their purpose was to attack the camp. Taylor immediately informed his deputy and ordered him to prepare. He then took Jim and chased after the vehicles. However, during the pursuit, a group of bull dinosaurs suddenly charged at them. To these creatures, humans were fresh prey, and ordinary weapons had no effect on them. As the bull dinosaurs seemed ready to charge into the camp, Taylor handed the car over to Jim and got out to attract their attention. Initially, the bull dinosaurs ignored Taylor's provocation and headed straight for the camp. Fortunately, at the last moment, a gunshot caught their attention, and Jim circled back. After picking up Taylor, they rushed back to the camp. Once the gates were closed, the soldiers in the watchtower immediately aimed their sonic cannons at the bull dinosaurs. With the sonic cannons attack, the dinosaurs were forced to turn around and leave. While this crisis was averted, the rebels were still inside the camp. A large group of armed rebels emerged from the 2 transport vehicles, facing off against the camp guards. The tension was palpable when the rebel leader, Mira, stepped forward. She explained that they had come for the man whom Taylor had imprisoned. However, knowing that force wouldn't work, she had brought a large box of rare minerals to trade for medicine, weapons, and her companions. Taylor agreed to Mira's terms, not wanting to escalate into a battle. After the rebels left, Jim immediately found his family, only to realize that his son Josh had disappeared. At that moment, Josh was following the young rebels to a more dangerous area. Surprisingly, these youths were bold enough to hide a brewing machine in the wilderness. Sky offered Josh a cup, and after one sip, he started coughing uncontrollably. It turned out that this was strong liquor made from prehistoric fruits and nuts. While the others went to gather more ingredients, Josh and Sky went to the river to wash the fruits. Along the way, Josh curiously asked about the weapon in Sky's hand. To his surprise, he learned that the small knife was made from the backward spike on a male saber-toothed dinosaur's tail, an essential tool for their survival. As they chatted, Josh began talking about his father. He believed they came from 2 different eras, so it was impossible for them to understand each other. In his eyes, his father was old-fashioned and hard to comprehend. While they were talking, 2 members of the rebels, who were patrolling nearby, noticed Sky and the other's vehicle. Seeing the car empty, they stole the car's battery and supplies. However, as they were about to leave, an unexpected event occurred. A saber-toothed dinosaur appeared and killed one of the rebels instantly. The creature's terrifying goose roar echoed through the sky, attracting Josh and the others' attention. While Josh didn't know what it was, the others immediately recognized the danger, and they hurried to leave. Little did they know, even greater danger awaited them. Meanwhile, Jim was brought to the monitoring room. Taylor and the others had discovered the children had escaped, and with night falling, if they didn't find them soon, their lives would be in grave danger. Upon returning home, Jim quickly packed up, leaving their 2 kids behind. Josh and the others returned to the car, but the car's battery had been stolen, making it impossible to leave. They noticed an armored vehicle nearby and guessed it was the rebels who took the battery. As they tried to retrieve it, they found blood on the ground, and the growling from the woods was getting louder. Panicking, they tried to hide in the car, but the surviving rebel pointed a weapon at them. Thankfully, Sky knew the man and successfully convinced him. As the dinosaur charged out of the woods, everyone managed to get into the vehicle. However, the power converter was crushed by the dinosaur's GPS tail, so they were stuck. Josh was already terrified by the situation, and the group huddled together in the car, shivering their spines and smelly butts. Yet, a brave girl didn't want to just sit and wait to die. Armed, she charged out. Though she encountered several attacks from the dinosaur, the girl was fortunate enough to be saved by a rescue team just in time. After telling Taylor their location, Taylor decided to send one vehicle to take the girl back to the camp and the rest of the team to rescue the children. As night fell, more dinosaurs emerged and attacked Josh and the others. Staying in the armored vehicle meant they'd be devoured eventually, so they got out and fought back. However, the dinosaurs kept coming, one after another, making it seem like the kids were seeking their doom. Soon, one young man paid the price for their reckless behavior. Moreover, the group quickly ran out of ammunition. Just when they thought they were doomed, Jim and the others arrived, saving the surviving members. Meanwhile, the rebel had disappeared from the vehicle, clearly having been secretly rescued by Mira. After this incident, both Sky and Josh realized their mistakes. That night, Sky took the initiative to apologize to Taylor. However, when Taylor asked if she had been by the river, Sky denied it. Unbeknownst to her, the rebel leader Mira had already found the traces left by Josh and the others. She knew that if Taylor discovered these signs, he would be furious because these symbols were his secret. They represented his only connection with his son and served as a constant reminder that the real reason behind the Terra Nova was to control the past to manipulate the future. Yet the dangers of the new home were far from over. That night, a supply vehicle was heading to the camp, but it had an unexpected flat tire. When the 2 soldiers got out to check, a terrifying roar suddenly came from the sky. Before they could even see their attackers, they were both killed instantly. The next day, upon hearing the news of the missing supply team, Taylor led a rescue team to the site. When they arrived, they found the soldiers' bodies on the ground, already lifeless and bearing numerous injuries, clearly from a dinosaur attack. However, they couldn't yet determine which dinosaur was responsible. To investigate, they took the bodies back to Elizabeth for testing. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Elizabeth ran into her ex-boyfriend, Malcolm. It turned out Malcolm was a 5th-batch immigrant and now the chief scientist in the Terra Nova. Elizabeth's selection seemed to be related to him in some way. Jim, though a little jealous, said nothing since there was still work to do. However, after extracting DNA samples from the soldiers, they discovered that the dinosaur responsible for the attack was a new species from the Cretaceous period, with no record in their database. This made Jim uneasy, but what worried him more was Malcolm. The unexpected arrival of a romantic rival didn't sit well with him. Elizabeth found Jim's jealousy amusing, and that evening, they planned to have a long-awaited hormone yoga session. But just as the atmosphere grew tense, a sudden bird call outside shattered the mood. Furious, Jim put on his clothes and rushed outside, finding a group of pterosaurs perched on the fence. Josh, annoyed, threw stones at them, provoking the pterosaurs. The 2 were soon attacked and had to scramble back into the house. After observing the situation, Jim realized that the dinosaurs that attacked the supply team earlier were most likely the pterosaurs. The next morning, he immediately reported this to Taylor. However, Taylor had no strategy to deal with flying dinosaurs and could only rely on Malcolm, hoping he could come up with a way to tackle the pterosaurs and strengthen the base's defenses. Seeing how much Taylor trusted Malcolm, Jim couldn't help but feel suspicious. He asked Taylor if his wife's selection was related to Malcolm in any way. When he learned that it was indeed Malcolm's recommendation that got them into the Terra Nova, Jim realized that Malcolm might still have hormone feelings for Elizabeth. Sure enough, as soon as Malcolm left, he sought out Elizabeth, wanting to invite her to join his team for research, but Elizabeth had not yet given him a response. Meanwhile, Josh and Sky's relationship was gradually becoming more intimate. During one of their outings, a flock of pterosaurs caught their attention. The pterosaurs suddenly attacked the villagers, forcing everyone to flee in panic. Once the pterosaurs had left, Josh and Sky reported their findings to Taylor and the others. The pterosaurs had left so suddenly that there had been no warning signs. Malcolm, however, noticed a pattern in the attacks and speculated that the pterosaurs might be migrating in large groups. This attack was likely just the first wave, and more would follow. This news put Taylor in a foul mood, but bad news kept coming. The thermal sensors detected thousands of pterosaurs hiding in the nearby forest. They were likely preparing for their next attack, and the sheer number of them was mind-boggling. To confirm that the sensor wasn't malfunctioning, Taylor ordered a sonic cannon to be fired into the forest. Upon impact, the pterosaurs all flew out of their nests. Originally, they had time to come up with a plan, but now it was too late. With danger approaching fast, Malcolm concluded that animals migrate for 3 reasons: climate change, to avoid predators, or for reproduction. This realization hit Taylor like a lightning bolt. He suddenly remembered that during the camp's early construction, the location was chosen because it was filled with eggshells, and the land was ideal for farming and building. Reflecting on the situation, he realized that the eggshells must have come from the pterosaurs. The area they were building on was likely their breeding ground, and by settling there, they had taken over the pterosaurs' territory. Fortunately, Malcolm and Elizabeth came up with a plan to synthesize a new pheromone to attract the pterosaurs to another area. However, they needed live specimens, and both a male and female. Time was running out, as the next attack could be as soon as the next day. Taylor decided to go on a hunt that very night. After a long night of hunting, Jim and the team successfully captured 2 pterosaurs. However, just as the research was speeding up, pterosaurs began circling the camp in the sky like a dark cloud. Though everyone had fortified their homes into makeshift fortresses, they had overlooked the ventilation ducts. That night, the pterosaurs began their assault. Jim's house was the first to be targeted. Several pterosaurs came through the ventilation ducts and knocked out the lone soldier inside. Seeing this, Josh and the others rushed to get him to safety, but they had forgotten about Zoe, who was hiding in the living room. Luckily, Josh managed to kick one of the pterosaurs away at the last moment, saving his little sister. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and the team had finally perfected the pheromone. Taylor and Jim immediately placed the container in the car and sped out of the camp, with countless pterosaurs following them. However, as hours passed, they still hadn't returned. As everyone grew anxious, the battered armored vehicle finally appeared in their line of sight. Although they were injured, the camp's safety had been secured. When Jim and Elizabeth returned home, they found the children fast asleep on the couch. Finally, they had a moment to themselves for a long-awaited, intimate hormone yoga session together. The next day, Taylor and the team discovered that a nearby scientific research station had lost contact with the camp. Taylor suspected it was a communication issue, so he didn't bring Malcolm and Jim along, instead choosing to take Elizabeth. However, when they arrived at the station, they found the gates wide open and the cables had been severed by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. As they slowly entered the station, they were shocked to find that all the researchers had been locked inside the medical room. After examining them, Elizabeth discovered that they had lost their memories and were suffering from delusions. At that moment, she found a video from the researcher on the computer revealing that this was caused by an unknown virus. This meant that since the 3 of them had entered the station, they too could have been infected. For safety, Taylor decided to stay there for the night and leave once the cause was clear. Meanwhile, Jim learned about the situation at the research station from the lieutenant and immediately sought out Malcolm, demanding a vehicle to investigate. Upon hearing this, Malcolm insisted on going along as well. The 2 arrived at the station, taking gas masks with them. However, when they found Elizabeth, she raised her weapon and attacked them, knocking both men to the ground. What was even more surprising was that when Elizabeth saw Malcolm, she burst into tears and rushed to hug him, wanting to have a baby with him. Clearly, she had been infected by the virus. Her memories were stuck in the past, back when she and Malcolm were still deeply in love 20 years ago. This news was hard for Jim to accept, but to avoid triggering his wife's memories, he chose to keep this secret. After hearing the roar of dinosaurs outside, Jim grabbed his weapon and went out to try and chase away the T-Rex. However, during his patrol, he found a knocked-out soldier and came across a memory-lost Taylor. Taylor's memory was stuck many years in the past when his wife was captured by enemy forces. He mistakenly thought Jim was a soldier sent by the enemy. Though Jim desperately tried to explain, it was to no avail. Fortunately, Taylor didn't want to do anything harmful and just knocked Jim unconscious. When Jim woke up and groggily returned to the control room, he was stunned to find Malcolm and Elizabeth hugging using their muscles, about to do something inappropriate. He immediately pulled them apart. After questioning, Jim discovered that Malcolm had also been affected by the virus. It was clear that his memory was also compromised. To prevent Malcolm from making advances toward his wife, Jim took Malcolm to the warehouse, planning to bring the unconscious soldier back. However, halfway there, Malcolm completely lost his memory and thought Jim had done something illegal. Before Jim could explain, a velociraptor suddenly popped out of an overhead hole. Jim quickly dragged Malcolm into the warehouse to hide. This scene was hard for Malcolm to accept. Jim knew that he had to handle things on his own now. He realized the velociraptor wasn't attacking the soldiers, but was instead inspecting the cables. So he grabbed an axe and cut the cable, opening the main door. As the velociraptor turned its attention to the sparking cable, it ignored the two men, giving them the chance to escape back to the control room. However, Malcolm, acting like a deadweight, was struggling to believe what was happening. Finally, Jim was fed up with his complaints and knocked him out. Back at the camp, Taylor had secretly returned and taken Jim's eldest daughter hostage. Fortunately, he still recognized the lieutenant. After listening to her explanation, Taylor reluctantly decided to trust her and released the girl. However, when he learned that his wife had died in the future, he was overwhelmed with grief and attempted to take his own life. Sensing something was wrong, the lieutenant acted quickly, drawing her weapon and knocking Taylor out. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, upon seeing the names of her children, had a vague memory of her life with Jim. Seeing this, Jim revealed his true identity to her. However, Elizabeth noticed something odd. Jim hadn't lost his memory despite being there for so long. After asking him, Jim explained that he had recently caught a cold and had been taking the medicine Taylor gave him. Elizabeth immediately realized that the medicine contained something that prevented the virus from spreading, but after some research, they found that it didn't actually have any immunity-boosting components. This meant that the cold virus had suppressed the unknown virus. To help Elizabeth recover her memory, Jim decided on a romantic gesture. He tongue massaged her passionately, but without letting go of their smelly hormones. The next day, after Elizabeth had regained her memory and developed an antibody vaccine, she immediately vaccinated all the villagers. Both Taylor and Malcolm also recovered their memories. However, they were so busy with the camp's work that they neglected Josh. While chatting with Sky, Josh thought about his girlfriend back on Earth. Though they were separated, he didn't want her to stay on Earth and live a hopeless life. So he turned to the camp's bartender, Tom, hoping he could help bring her to Terra Nova. Rumor had it that Tom had secret connections and could smuggle people into Terra Nova. Unbeknownst to Josh, Tom was secretly working with Mira. It was Mira who could help bring his girlfriend, and when she learned that the request came from Jim's son, she immediately became interested and instructed Tom to get close to Josh. Furthermore, Mira, in her pursuit of a special device from the camp, sent a little girl to infiltrate and steal it, all while Taylor and the others remained unaware. That night, while on patrol, the soldiers monitoring the forest detected a figure through the thermal sensor. When the lieutenant and her team went to investigate, they unexpectedly found a little girl hiding in the woods. They brought her back to the camp, and after examining her, the girl attacked the medical staff in fear and began running wild around the infirmary, eventually hiding in a corner. It was only after Elizabeth gently calmed her down that she finally stopped being defensive. After the checkup, they found that, aside from being malnourished, the girl didn't have any other serious issues. At that moment, Taylor brought some food to the girl, who hungrily devoured it. Taylor recognized her. She was Leah, a rebel. She had lost both her parents at a young age and was left with only her younger brother. When they asked Leah why she was here, she explained that she had sneaked out because there wasn't enough food in Mira's camp. She hoped to return to Earth to find her grandmother. However, given the dire state of Earth's environment and the fact that modern technology could only facilitate one-way travel, returning was impossible. Leah was essentially a homeless orphan. Compassionate Elizabeth couldn't bear to see her in such a condition and temporarily took her in. Back at the camp, Leah went straight to sleep. Elizabeth planned to enroll her in the camp's school and figure things out later. Meanwhile, the lieutenant, accompanied by a soldier, went into the woods to retrieve Leah's lost backpack. After finding it, just as they were about to return, they were ambushed. Mira and her men captured the two. Under the cover of her troops, Mira brought the hostages to the camp, demanding that Taylor release Leah. But when Leah saw them, she hid behind Jim. She didn't want to go back to continue starving. Seeing this, Mira couldn't force the issue and released the hostages. After they left, Taylor asked Leah where the rebel base was, but she explained that they lived a nomadic life, constantly wandering without a fixed base. Hearing this, Taylor didn't press her further. Once the storm had passed, Elizabeth helped Leah enroll in school. But when they tried to send her off, Leah, after seeing them leave, didn't go into the school. Instead, she sneaked into the room Mira had been assigned while she was still at the camp. There, she stole a box from under the floorboards. Jim and the others soon realized that Leah was the only one who could have silently entered and stolen the box. They immediately set out to capture her. Leah was caught near the fence before she had the chance to escape. When they brought her to Taylor's office, Leah confessed that the box was the real reason Mira had sent her here. Her younger brother was being held hostage by Mira, and if she didn't return the box, her brother's life would be in danger. However, Taylor no longer believed Leah's story. But when Jim returned home and saw the apology written by Leah, he felt she wasn't lying. That night, Jim ventured into the woods alone, hoping to rescue Leah's brother. But along the way, he stepped into a trap set by the rebels and nearly became a velociraptor's meal. Luckily, the rebels found him and took him back to Mira. She told him she didn't want to harm Leah's brother and that she had left the camp because Taylor had offended the leaders of the 22nd century. The leaders had taken Mira's daughter hostage and forced her to eliminate Taylor. Mira explained that the so-called Terra Nova was all a lie and warned Jim to think carefully about his position, advising him not to try to change history. She then released Jim and allowed him to take Leah's brother with him. When Jim returned to camp, he didn't tell Taylor what Mira had said. Instead, he made up an excuse to avoid revealing the truth. Leah and her brother were adopted by a kind villager. However, not all villagers were as kind-hearted. That night, Soldier Foster went to check on the base station as usual, but he was attacked by dinosaurs. The next day, his body was found, showing no signs of life. Malcolm suspected that Foster had left the door open while doing maintenance and was attacked because the nearby area was the breeding ground for ankylosaurs. Their eggs were a delicacy for carnivorous dinosaurs, but after Jim and Elizabeth performed the autopsy, they discovered that the true killer was a long-tailed dinosaur. Additionally, they found prehistoric turkey blood in Foster's body. Since long-tailed dinosaurs were particularly fond of turkey, Jim suspected that this wasn't an accident but a premeditated murder. He had even found claw markings on the door where the long-tailed dinosaur had tried to escape. Why would the long-tailed dinosaur attempt to flee? There were no other predators in the area. Upon hearing Jim's theory, Taylor was furious and ordered Jim to uncover the truth and find the person behind the murder. After all, solving cases was Jim's expertise as a former sheriff. With the lieutenant's help, Jim conducted an investigation into Foster's relationships before his death. He learned that Foster didn't have any enemies, but he did have a girlfriend whose photo was kept in his identification badge. However, when they went through Foster's belongings, they couldn't find the badge. Back in the control room, they tracked the badge and discovered that it was moving in the woods, clearly swallowed by the long-tailed dinosaur. In order to retrieve the badge and identify Foster's girlfriend, Taylor and his team set out to hunt down the long-tailed dinosaur. Using its agility, the dinosaur skillfully evaded them, climbing into the trees. The group waited beneath the trees, losing patience until the dinosaur took the opportunity to jump down and attempt to flee. Taylor seized the moment and shot it dead to meet its maker. Upon searching the dinosaur's stomach, they found the badge and discovered that Foster's girlfriend was a worker in the cafeteria. However, it turned out that the girl had been married for 3 years, which made it clear that she was an unscrupulous woman. Jim went to the girl's home. There, they saw an award-winning poster and suspected that the girl might be the real culprit. Her husband, Howard, hadn't married her before coming here. He had won the lottery to gain immigrant status. To come to Terra Nova, the girl had married Howard. However, once they arrived, she became involved with the handsome Foster, as there was no emotional bond with Howard. Just then, Howard returned, bringing with him an unexpected confession. He was the real killer. Upon learning of his wife's betrayal, he had killed Foster in a fit of rage. He confessed to his crime, and his story perfectly matched the evidence found at the scene. Upon learning the truth, Taylor made a decision to exile Howard outside the camp. In this perilous prehistoric era, this punishment was as good as a death sentence. However, Elizabeth disagreed with the decision, arguing that it was too hasty to sentence someone solely based on a confession. The two had a heated argument, but Elizabeth's words made him reconsider. She suggested that Howard might have intentionally taken the fall. The next day, with everyone watching, Howard was exiled, but out in the wilderness, he was confronted by Jim. After Jim's reasoning, Howard admitted that he had taken the blame because he loved his wife so much. Unexpectedly, when Howard was brought back, his wife still denied being the killer. However, she gave Jim a new lead. Foster was a reckless gambler. Jim immediately investigated his financial records and found that someone owed Foster a lot of money. But instead of going after the debtor right away, Jim decided to capture Tom because he was the owner of the casino. No matter how hard they interrogated him, Tom wouldn't reveal any information. Jim was forced to go back to the bar for further clues. Just then, a soldier came to report that Tom had escaped. Taylor and Jim, along with Soldier Curran, immediately got in a car to pursue him. However, when they reached the wilderness, Taylor suddenly ordered Curran to confess. It turned out they had already discovered through the network that Curran was the one who owed money to Foster. Faced with the truth, Curran pointed his weapon at Taylor, but it was empty. As punishment, Taylor and Jim immediately sentenced Curran to exile in the wilderness. Little did they know, this decision would play a key role later on. However, the dangers of Terra Nova were far from over. The next day, a massive meteor streaked across the sky, heading straight for Earth. Everyone witnessed the spectacular event, and with the meteor's collision, the ground shook violently. Countless fiery meteor fragments scattered in all directions, sending thick plumes of smoke into the air. The explosion caused an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the camp's electronic equipment, and the entire camp suffered severe damage from the meteor's impact. Due to the loss of the camp's electronic equipment, the safety measures were compromised, and Taylor immediately ordered an increase in patrols and precautions. Meanwhile, the remaining research staff worked hard to restore the power supply. However, the meteor strike had caused numerous injuries, and the hospital was filled with patients. One man who had sneaked a drink of taruka sap had been completely taken over by parasites in his body. Without the help of the necessary equipment, he was in excruciating pain. The only way to save him was to remove the parasites. After administering local anesthesia, Elizabeth began the surgery. A long, thick parasite was slowly extracted from the man's abdomen, but just then, a more urgent case arrived. With no other choice, Elizabeth had to leave the task to a nurse nearby. Just as they were about to remove the parasite, it suddenly fought back, severing its tail and retreating back into the man's body. By the time Elizabeth returned, the parasite had burrowed deep into the man's stomach. Fortunately, by this time, Malcolm and the others had successfully repaired the electronics and restored the power supply. With modern equipment, Elizabeth was finally able to remove the parasite. But then, an even greater danger appeared. The rebels had driven a massive stegosaurus toward the camp. Facing the dinosaur attack, Taylor was prepared. He and Jim fired an arrow, igniting gasoline outside the camp, creating a fire that halted the stegosaurus's advance. However, Taylor noticed a spear stuck in the stegosaurus's leg and suspected that this was part of Mira's scheme. He immediately took Jim back to the lab, where they found some rebels stealing items. Despite their best efforts to stop them, a man managed to steal a mysterious box, and his accomplices were waiting outside to assist him. The two could only watch as the rebels made their escape. After obtaining the box, Mira took it to a mysterious man, none other than Taylor's biological son, Lucas. While Taylor and Malcolm had struggled to open the box, Lucas easily unlocked it. To their surprise, the box contained an advanced piece of technology filled with vast amounts of knowledge. At the same time, because Mira had stolen the box, Taylor suspected that a traitor must be inside the camp, which was why the location had been compromised. He decided to focus his next mission on finding the traitor. However, before they could even identify who the traitor was, Josh secretly arrived at the rebels' base. He wanted Mira's help bringing his girlfriend to the Terra Nova. Since Josh was Jim's son, Mira saw him as a valuable pawn and agreed to his request without demanding anything unreasonable. She then used a device similar to a magnifying glass to bring Josh's girlfriend before him. Although they lived in different eras, they were finally reunited. Mira then demanded Josh to steal a rare medicine from the camp. The task was given to him because the medicine was hidden in a safe that only Elizabeth could open. Wanting to bring his girlfriend over, Josh didn't hesitate to agree. When he returned home, he stole the pass from his mother's clothes and under the cover of night went to the hospital. However, in order to open the safe, he needed both the pass and Elizabeth's facial recognition. Unable to get the pass to work, he resorted to more drastic measures. He raised a weapon and used force to break open the safe, stealing the medicine. The next day, after Jim investigated the scene, he discovered that the weapon used to open the safe was a pulse gun, and he began his investigation based on this lead. Meanwhile, Taylor was preparing for a secret operation. That morning, he went alone into the woods and found Curran, who had been living outside after being exiled. Curran had sustained numerous injuries, with the worst being a bite from a prehistoric lizard on his leg. The wound was gruesome, but the most dangerous part was the venom released by the creature. The venom gradually caused Curran to lose his consciousness, and when he was on the verge of death, the lizard would attack. To get Curran to assist with his secret mission, Taylor waited by his side that night. As time passed, the lizard appeared nearby. Taking advantage of the situation, Taylor jumped down from a tree, brandishing a torch and weapon, shouting to intimidate the creature. The lizard, being naturally fearful, chose to flee under Taylor's influence. The next day, Curran woke up and, curious about why Taylor had saved him, Taylor revealed his true intention. He gave Curran the map to the rebels' base and asked him to infiltrate Mira's camp and bring back intelligence. Meanwhile, there has been no progress in Jim's case. While working with Josh, the couple discussed the thief and mentioned a patient who urgently needed a rare medicine or they wouldn't survive the night. Although Josh can be headstrong at times, she has a good heart. That evening, she took the medicine and placed it in front of her parents, explaining why she stole it. She also revealed that Tom had given her the information and introduced her to Mira. Upon learning this, Jim immediately detained Tom and informed Taylor. Taylor suspected that Mira had access to this technology because Lucas was by her side. Only he had such expertise. Jim wondered if the rebels had captured Lucas and coerced him into working for them, suggesting they could try to rescue him. However, Taylor rejected this idea. His relationship with his son was extremely strained, and there was a huge secret between them that no one knew. At this point, Mira was unaware that Taylor had planted an undercover agent in her camp. Lacking advanced technology and government food supplies, most of the camp's resources were acquired through theft. Mira's method of gathering information was quite traditional. A massive prehistoric dragonfly was her source of intel, providing her with crucial updates in a special way. One day, Taylor sent a transport team to deliver supplies to a medical station far off. With the dragonfly's help, Mira learned of the convoy's route and set up an ambush on the road before they arrived. When the transport trucks drove into the trap, they were completely unprepared. The roads were blocked by large trees, and soon, rebels stormed out, capturing all the soldiers aboard. However, they didn't harm them, they simply stole the supplies. Back at Taylor's camp, he was still unaware of the ambush and was interrogating Tom in the holding room. No matter how Taylor pressed, Tom insisted he only traded goods with Mira and hadn't revealed any internal information to her. But Taylor wasn't about to buy that story. To force him to speak the truth, Taylor activated an alarm, its harsh sound unbearable to Tom. But that wasn't enough. Taylor kept him in this noisy environment for a full day and night. By the time Taylor saw him again, Tom looked half dead, delirious, but still repeating the same answer. Jim couldn't stand it anymore and decided to take over the interrogation. With no choice, Taylor handed the task to him. When the questioning began, Tom mistook Jim for Taylor and threatened to reveal a secret that Taylor had hidden under the immigrant tree years ago. Jim was stunned by this revelation. That night, under the cover of darkness, he went to the immigrant tree to investigate. After some digging, he found something hard beneath the surface. When he uncovered it, a skeleton appeared in front of him. He didn't immediately ask Taylor about it, but instead secretly took the body to the hospital. After an initial examination by Elizabeth, it was determined that the deceased was likely a middle-aged man who had been dead for 4 to 6 years, with the cause of death being a gunshot wound. To learn more, a deeper investigation would be necessary. The next day, a soldier on patrol accidentally knocked down a dragonfly and discovered that it was carrying a chip attempting to smuggle it out. After some analysis, Malcolm deduced that the dragonfly functioned like an ancient messenger pigeon used by the camp's insider to transmit messages. However, the method of controlling the dragonfly was still unclear. Meanwhile, the attacked transport team returned to the camp. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but this meant that catching the traitor had become urgent. The ambush also cleared Tom of suspicion, as he couldn't have committed the crime due to a lack of opportunity. But the investigation into the skeleton stalled, as Elizabeth discovered that the DNA didn't match any known travelers in the database, and it wasn't from an identified time traveler either. Molecular signals should be left behind by anyone who traveled through time, but this skeleton had none. To get to the bottom of things, Jim approached the released Tom. Tom, however, didn't know the identity of the deceased. He only knew about it because he had helped Commander Taylor bury the body years ago, but he was certain it had something to do with Taylor's son, Lucas. Soon, Malcolm and Taylor discovered the skeleton as well. Taylor didn't expose the truth but lied, claiming that the body belonged to a rebel and the matter was dropped. Shortly after, Malcolm made a significant breakthrough. He found that the dragonflies were controlled by sound wave signals. Once the dragonfly's injuries healed, they experimented with it, only for the creature to end up in Jim's home under their control. At this point, Jim was unaware of the situation and was watching a performance by his wife and his little daughter Zoe. However, a little boy on stage caught their attention. The boy was playing the role of Taylor's superior, whose arm was missing on one side. Just as Jim suspected the victim was Taylor's superior, Taylor appeared with his men and arrested Jim on charges of colluding with the enemy. Once they were in a secure room, Taylor threatened Jim to stop his investigation or else he would be left in prison. When Jim refused, Taylor didn't press further and simply walked away. But when he heard Jim mention his superior's name, Taylor froze, then explained the reason behind his superior's death and revealed the truth about Terra Nova. It turned out that Terra Nova was never about home building or development. The real goal was to travel to the prehistoric era and plunder its resources. The scientist who developed the bidirectional portal was none other than Lucas. Upon discovering his son's secret, Taylor was furious, destroyed his son's laboratory, and secretly followed him, only to discover that Lucas had met with his superior, who immediately decided to strip Taylor of his position, revealing that the leader behind him was far more powerful than Taylor could ever hope to contend with. Unable to accept this, and seeing that his superior was about to execute him, Taylor acted first and killed his superior. Yet Lucas remained stubborn, choosing to sever ties with his father. Over the past 5 years, he never stopped his calculations, writing them on rocks as if mocking his father. To prevent the truth from destroying the entire colony, Taylor chose to bear the burden alone. He then released Jim, cleared his name, and attended the village festival in the town square. As fireworks lit up the sky deep in the woods, Lucas watched closely from a distance, his eyes locked on the camp. Taylor knew that to protect Terra Nova, he had to stop his son. So the day after the festival, he handed over control of the camp to the lieutenant and went alone into the woods to find Lucas. After crossing mountains and rivers, Taylor found the data Lucas had left on the rocks by a stream. While he was studying it, Mira quietly appeared behind him. With her weapon, she controlled Taylor and knew exactly where he was. Clearly, there was an insider in the camp feeding her information. But Taylor didn't have time to think about the traitor, as he was being taken to the rebel base by Mira. On the way, Taylor seized every chance to escape, but Mira had a weapon and quickly knocked him to the ground with a sonic blast. What Taylor didn't realize was that this was part of Mira's true plan. Taking advantage of her momentary distraction, Taylor hid a reed spike in his hand and, while talking to Mira to distract her, began cutting the ropes binding him. During their conversation, Mira revealed why she had defected from the camp. Her daughter had contracted pneumonia due to the harsh future environment. A powerful figure had approached her, asking her to kill Taylor in exchange for the best treatment for her daughter. Meanwhile, Taylor had successfully cut the ropes, and as Mira's attention faltered, he managed to overpower her sexy body, taking her weapon without a kiss. Though the situation had flipped in their favor, a greater danger lurked in the woods. A pack of scavenger dinosaurs, sensing human presence, launched their attack. The two fled for their shitty lives but were cornered at the edge of a cliff. With a waterfall in front and scavenger dinosaurs behind, they had no choice but to jump. They barely survived the fall, but their weapons were lost. To escape the woods alive, the two enemies had to cooperate. That night, they crafted a bow and arrow from tree branches. Mira shot the arrow, soaked in diesel, while Taylor threw a torch at the scavenger dinosaur. The other dinosaur, seeing its companion under attack, howled and covered its partner's escape. After this night of mutual assistance, their relationship softened slightly. The next morning, Mira informed Taylor that his son was close to completing his plan. She promised to help Lucas and then reunite with her daughter. Meanwhile, the mole inside the camp was beginning to show signs. Jim discovered someone was using the reflection of glass to communicate with the rebels. However, when he reached the location, he found no one there, just a drop of diabetic blood inside a glass cup. Unbeknownst to him, Skye was hiding in a corner, her hand cut by the shattered glass. It turned out Skye was the mole in the camp. She wasn't an orphan. Years ago, her mother had contracted a deadly flu. At the time, the camp's medical technology wasn't advanced enough, but the rebels had the means to treat it. To save her mother, Skye had claimed her mother was dead and secretly became a spy for the camp, passing information to Mira and her group so her mother could survive. After bringing the blood sample back, Jim tried to use the equipment to identify whose blood it was, but the results would take 12 hours. Later that evening, in an effort to cover her tracks, Skye sneaked into the hospital, destroyed her blood sample, and then went to the rebel base to deliver the latest intel to Lucas. Before she left, Lucas handed her a chip and instructed her to insert it into a supercomputer called the Eye of History upon her return. The computer contained all the data from the future world. She had no choice but to follow through with the plan to save her mother. Once she returned with the supercomputer's data, Lucas was ecstatic. He could now use this data to make the portal bi-directional and push his father from power. Skye was curious about why Lucas hated his father so much, but he didn't answer. Instead, he told her to ask Taylor about something that happened in August 2138. Unbeknownst to him, Jim had already discovered Skye was the mole. After investigating the suspicious individuals, he confirmed Skye's involvement through surveillance, tracking her movements and confirming her betrayal. Shocked by this revelation, Taylor couldn't believe that he had always treated Skye like his own daughter. But with the evidence clear, he decided to use a strategy to draw Lucas out. He leaked a rumor that the 11th batch immigrants would soon arrive, and within an hour, he would personally lead a team with weapons to the portal. As expected, Skye quickly left the camp after hearing the news. Taylor drove to the portal as planned, and Jim set up an ambush along the route. However, things didn't go as expected. The rebels didn't attempt to seize the supplies because Skye hadn't shared the plan with Lucas. She had left the camp only to visit her mother. Meanwhile, Lucas informed her that his plan had succeeded. He was now returning to the 22nd century with an army and super weapons. Skye was terrified. She cried to her mother, believing it was all her fault, but her mother urged her not to fear or worry about her own life. What mattered now was saving everyone in the camp. Skye rushed to tell Taylor about Lucas's plan, but Taylor didn't believe her until she mentioned the event in August 2138. Only he and Lucas knew about it, and now it seemed Skye was telling the truth. He and Jim rushed to the portal, intending to give orders to the guards. But by then, Lucas had already reached the portal. Using his equipment, Lucas activated the portal, releasing a powerful electromagnetic pulse that knocked the guards to the ground. He didn't leave immediately, but stayed until evening. When father and son met again, Taylor tried to convince his son not to take actions that would endanger Terra Nova, but Lucas was resolute. The two could only watch as Lucas stepped through the time portal. Knowing he couldn't stop his son's plan, Taylor returned to rally the troops. In the 22nd century, Lucas found his ally, Weaver. The two gathered a well-armed group of mercenaries to head to the prehistoric world. Meanwhile, Taylor made his own preparations, stationing elite soldiers at the portal. They weren't sure if they would face 100 new immigrants or a team of mercenaries. Soon, one by one, ordinary immigrants came through, including Josh's girlfriend. But then, a man appeared, carrying a large bundle of explosives. Before anyone could react, the bomb was detonated. Jim, unable to escape in time, was knocked unconscious in the explosion. When he woke up, he found himself lying in the infirmary. When Jim stepped outside, he was shocked to see what was once a thriving camp had now turned into a ruin. Lucas, Weaver, and the others had taken control of the place. Elizabeth told him that after the explosion, a large group of mercenaries arrived at the Terra Nova, and in the face of these well-equipped soldiers, they had no choice but to surrender. As for Taylor, he had gone missing during the battle. With Lucas and his team now living in the camp, everyone was living in constant fear. To flush Taylor out and prevent anyone from warning him, Lucas imposed strict control over everyone. No one was allowed to leave the camp after 8 p.m., and there were guards on duty 24/7. Hearing about this, Jim was furious. He wanted to overthrow Lucas's rule, but he knew his strength was too small. So, he turned to the deposed lieutenant, hoping to join forces and take them down. The two met at a tavern where mercenaries had become regulars. They drank freely without paying, and Tom, the tavern owner, dared not complain. Jim became curious about these men and asked around, only to learn that they were all mercenaries from the Phoenix Mercenary Group. The camp was now under their control, and any resistance seemed nearly impossible. When Jim asked about Malcolm, the lieutenant told him that Malcolm was currently helping Lucas because the portal malfunctioned. As a result, Lucas had recruited him to assist with the repairs. Jim felt a sense of betrayal upon hearing this. He went to find Malcolm, and when he did, he couldn't hold back his anger and gave him an earful. Malcolm felt wronged as well. He had watched his assistant be executed on the spot for refusing Lucas's demands. He had agreed to help them in order to survive. All he could do now was try to slow down the repairs, buying time for Jim and the others. Meanwhile, Mira discovered that Jim was no longer in his bed and went searching for him. She found him in Malcolm's lab, but fortunately, Malcolm covered for him. He explained that Jim had lost his hearing in the explosion and had suffered a severe concussion, leaving him mentally unstable. With their cooperation, Lucas and his team no longer suspected Jim. To stop their plot before Lucas could summon more soldiers, Jim made a bold decision. The next day, with Malcolm's help, he sneaked into an armored vehicle and followed Lucas and the others as they left the camp. Once they reached their destination, Jim quietly slipped out of the vehicle. From their conversation, he learned that they planned to destroy the area to mine the minerals, and they had brought a soundwave bomb to make the first mining site a clean slate. Jim realized the situation was dire, but he had a lead on finding Taylor. While performing surgery on the mercenaries, Elizabeth had discovered a bullet with coordinates marked on it. Jim suspected this was a secret code from Taylor. He followed the coordinates and finally found Taylor. Upon learning of Lucas's plan, the brave girl immediately said that if they used a remote detonator, she could track the bomb's location using the remote signal and defuse it before it was activated. Unaware of this, Lucas took his soldiers to install the bomb, while Weaver stayed on the hillside, using a thermal telescope to spot Taylor and his group hiding in the woods. When Lucas learned of this, he ordered Weaver to detonate the bomb. Unfortunately, Weaver hadn't made it out of the danger zone yet. It was only after he finally reached a safe area that he pressed the detonator, but nothing happened. The brave girl had successfully disarmed the bomb. Lucas was furious. When he returned to the hillside, he grabbed a rocket launcher and fired it at the bomb's location in anger. Unfortunately, Taylor and the others had already left, and Jim's plan was far from over. He coordinated with Taylor to take out several patrol teams and seize a lot of weapons and supplies. Lucas quickly realized there was a mole, and he was certain it was Jim. To expose him, Lucas took Skye to the tavern and began taunting her in front of Josh, finally triggering Jim's anger. When Josh attacked, the mercenaries swarmed in, torturing him mercilessly. Sky, worried about Josh's safety, immediately sent word to Jim. Upon hearing this, Jim decided to stop playing dumb and rushed to the tavern, only to be captured and tortured without mercy. Despite the brutal treatment, Jim kept his mouth shut. He was curious why Lucas hated his father so much. Hearing this, Lucas finally explained. Back in August 2138, a group of soldiers had captured him and his mother and brought them before Taylor, who had been forced to choose between them. Taylor chose his son. This decision was clearly Taylor's, yet in the following years, he blamed Lucas, thinking it was because of his son's weakness that his wife had left him. This guilt and anger from Taylor warped Lucas's psyche, and now, no matter what happened, his hatred for his father couldn't be changed. At that moment, Weaver suddenly walked in with the news that they had found Taylor's whereabouts. After Lucas left, Weaver secretly rescued Jim. Just before, Weaver had been suffering from an intense itch and went to see a doctor. Elizabeth, however, revealed she had injected him with a batch of parasite eggs, which would breed inside him for 24 hours and eventually reach his brain. To survive, Weaver would have to rely on his own antidote. She demanded that Weaver bring her husband to her in exchange for saving Jim. Desperate to live, Weaver helped her rescue Jim, but when Elizabeth was about to fulfill her promise, she revealed it was all a lie. Weaver had never been parasitized. By the time Lucas realized what had happened, Jim and the others had already escaped. To ensure their getaway, the lieutenant volunteered to be a decoy. She blew up the camp's armory to cover Jim and his family's escape. However, after being captured, she was shot dead by Lucas. From a distance, Taylor watched helplessly as his deputy fell in front of him, and the pain in his heart was unbearable. Back at the temporary camp, Taylor told Jim that they planned to destroy the portal, cutting off Lucas's only escape route and ensuring that no one from the future could come to Terra Nova. This also meant they would lose contact with the future, relying solely on the current villagers to rebuild a new home. But this was the only option. If they wanted a better future, they would have to rise from the ashes. Meanwhile, Mira returned from the wilderness with an important item at the request of her employer. When everyone saw it, they were shocked and immediately planned to send it back to the 22nd century. As they celebrated their progress, Sky found Lucas and offered to join him. Lucas, already fond of Sky, didn't suspect a thing. When preparing to return to the future, he even took Sky with him. Taylor and the others were ready to begin their final plan. On the way, Sky suddenly claimed she had a way to contact Taylor. Hearing this, Lucas immediately stopped and decided to head back to the camp. However, just then, two soldiers suddenly emerged from behind the vehicle. It turned out that Sky had been working to support Taylor all along. After subduing Lucas, Sky copied the information card from the vehicle and transferred it to another armored car. Jim, hidden inside, followed Weaver back to the 22nd century. Meanwhile, Lucas saw his chance, broke free, and fled. On the escape route, he encountered Taylor. In a fight between father and son, Lucas was no match for the experienced soldier. As he was being beaten badly, Lucas pretended to regret everything, crying like a giant baby and holding on to his father. In the moment of distraction, he stabbed his father in the abdomen. Fortunately, Sky arrived just in time, firing 2 quick shots to take Lucas away to meet Satan. In the 22nd century square, Jim waited for the car to stop before inserting a vial of medication into a cloth bag. Moments later, when the trunk opened, a Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly charged out. This was the surprise Jim had brought back from the prehistoric era. As soon as the T-Rex emerged, it took down an unfortunate old man. After Weaver and his employer hid, they used the employer as a decoy to attract the T-Rex's attention, making him the dinosaur's dinner. Meanwhile, Jim took advantage of the chaos and planted a soundwave bomb in the center of the square before sprinting toward the portal. However, he was caught by Weaver halfway. Luckily, the T-Rex, a very reliable ally, charged in and bit Weaver, buying Jim precious time to escape. Just then, the soundwave bomb activated, and with the explosion rapidly approaching from behind, Jim made a final dash into the portal, returning to the prehistoric world and reuniting with his wife. Upon hearing the news that the portal had been destroyed, the rebels and mercenaries withdrew from the camp, and Jim and his team successfully reclaimed their homeland. At this point, scouts arrived to report that the mercenaries were heading toward the wilderness, which seemed odd to Taylor and the others. Jim remembered the armored car with the suspicious contents, so they went to investigate. When they opened the trunk, they found a wooden ship's bow carving, likely from the 18th century. It was a relic from the wilderness, indicating that someone must have entered this land long before they did. Clearly, the wilderness held some massive secrets. However, the most important task now wasn't exploring the wilderness, but rebuilding their new home. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.